The board chair, Margaret Sullivan, placed my presentation from 6 months ago on the conference table, right beside Vanguard's quarterly loss report showing $15 million in losses. Her voice was ice cold. "Margaret, we paid consultants $500,000 to tell us exactly what Rachel warned us about for free 6 months ago. Philip, you called her analysis catastrophically wrong. You told this board her projections were fear-mongering." She paused, letting it sink in. "Now we've lost $15 million, closed 30 stores, and laid off 400 employees. Everything she predicted happened, exactly as she said it would." Philip had publicly mocked my presentation 6 months earlier. He called me incompetent in front of the entire executive team and told everyone I didn't understand retail. Now the board held up my analysis, comparing it to the disaster that had unfolded, realizing every single warning had come true. Philip was about to learn something important. Being wrong is expensive, but being wrong after publicly mocking the person who was right is career-ending. My name is Rachel Morgan. I'm 33 years old, single, and 6 months ago I was a senior strategic analyst at Vanguard Enterprises, a retail chain with 200 stores across the Midwest. Vanguard sold mid-range clothing and home goods. Think Target meets Kohl's. The company had been in business for 40 years, with steady growth, reliable profits, and a comfortable market position. I'd worked there for 5 years, starting as a junior analyst straight out of grad school. By year 3, I was promoted to senior analyst, reporting directly to the VP of strategy. My job was to analyze market trends, consumer behavior, competitive threats, and recommend the company's direction. I was good at it. Really good. I had accurately predicted 3 major retail shifts before they became obvious: online shopping acceleration, the death of department stores, and the move toward experiential retail. My reports were always data-driven, thoroughly researched, and backed by solid analysis. My boss was Philip Donovan, the VP of strategy. He was 51, had been with Vanguard for 20 years, and worked his way up from store manager to executive. Philip was old-school retail. He believed in brick-and-mortar stores, traditional advertising, and an if it isn't broken, don't fix it mindset. That mindset was about to break everything. The problem started about 8 months earlier, when I noticed troubling patterns in our sales data. Same-store sales were declining, slowly but consistently. Foot traffic was down. Customer demographics were skewing older. Younger shoppers, the 18 to 35 demographic, were no longer coming to our stores. I dug deeper. I surveyed customers, analyzed competitor data, studied market trends, reviewed economic indicators. The picture that emerged was alarming. Vanguard was losing relevance. Our product mix was outdated. Our store experience felt dated. Our online presence was nearly non-existent. Meanwhile, competitors like Target and online retailers were capturing the customers we were losing. I spent 2 months building a comprehensive analysis, market data, consumer surveys, competitive benchmarking, and financial projections. The projections showed what would happen if we didn't change course. The conclusions were stark. If Vanguard didn't modernize immediately, we would see accelerating losses within 12 months, store closures, layoffs, and potential bankruptcy within 3 years. My recommendations were clear: invest in e-commerce infrastructure, renovate store formats and update product lines, target younger demographics, and create an omni-channel retail experience. The price tag was approximately $20 million over 2 years, but the alternative was losing everything. I requested a presentation slot at the quarterly board meeting. This was serious enough that the board needed to hear it directly. Philip approved the request, though he seemed annoyed. I spent 3 weeks preparing the presentation, 60 slides, every data point verified and every projection backed by methodology. The board meeting was scheduled for a Wednesday morning in April. The full board was present, along with executives and department heads. About 30 people in total. Margaret Sullivan, the board chair, was 70 years old and sharp as a tack. He had founded a successful manufacturing company before retiring to board positions. She did not tolerate nonsense. James Liu, the CFO, was 48. Numbers focused, conservative, but willing to invest if the case was compelling. And then there was Philip Donovan, my boss, sitting front row, arms crossed. I presented for 40 minutes. I showed declining sales trends and shifting customer demographics. I showed competitive threats and accelerating financial losses. Then I presented my recommendations: the investment required, the expected returns, the implementation timeline. I concluded with this: Vanguard is at a critical inflection point. The retail landscape has fundamentally changed. We can invest now or face serious financial decline within 12 months. The data is clear. The choice is ours. I finished and looked around the room. Several board members were nodding. Ames Liu was taking notes. Margaret Sullivan studied the financial projections closely. Then Philip spoke. He thanked me and dismissed the analysis. He said I was painting an unnecessarily dire picture, that I was proposing we spend $20 million over a few quarters of declining sales. I corrected him. This wasn't a few quarters. It was an accelerating 18-month trend. Philip brushed it off. Retail had cycles, he said. He'd seen this before. This was no different. I pushed back. This wasn't an economic collapse. It was specific to Vanguard. Our competitors were growing while we were shrinking. That wasn't a cycle. It was a competitive failure. Philip stood up and walked to the front of the room. He positioned himself between me and the board. He said I had taken concerning data and turned it into an existential crisis. That spending $20 million wasn't strategy. It was fear. He reminded the board of his 30 years in retail. Trends came and went. E-commerce didn't kill brick and mortar. Fast fashion didn't destroy traditional retail. Then he looked directly at me. He said I was a talented analyst, but I didn't understand retail. I understood data, and those were not the same thing. The room went silent. My face burned. He had just called me incompetent in front of everyone. Margaret Sullivan spoke up. She said my analysis was thorough, and the competitive data concerning Philip dismissed it. He said analysts could make data say anything. There was no need to panic. Margaret asked how confident I was in my projections. I took a breath. I said I had triple-checked everything. If Vanguard didn't act, the losses would come. Philip laughed. He recommended tabling the discussion. The board voted 15-3 against me. I walked out humiliated. Later, my colleague Kelly found me in my office. She apologized and said Philip undermined me. I said he'd called me incompetent in front of everyone. She said he was wrong. She asked what I was going to do. I looked at my presentation on my laptop. I said I would document everything. When I was proven right, I wanted a record. I saved every version of my analysis, every email, every data source, stored in a personal encrypted folder. Then I waited to be proven right. It didn't take long. 1 month after the board meeting, same-store sales declined another 3%. Philip sent a company-wide memo attributing it to seasonal fluctuations. Month 2 arrived. Customer traffic was down 7% year over year. Philip blamed temporary market softness. By month 3, we lost a major supplier. They partnered exclusively with Target. Philip called it an isolated incident. Kelly kept me updated on the internal discussions. She said Philip was still in denial. James Liu was starting to ask questions. The CFO could see the numbers deteriorating. Philip kept insisting the downturn was temporary. I asked what the board was saying. Kelly said nothing yet. They only met quarterly. The next board meeting was 3 months away. Kelly said, when they saw the numbers, there would be a reckoning. I updated my analysis every month. Every projection I made was coming true. Some outcomes happened even faster than predicted. Losses were accelerating exactly as my models showed. By month 4, Vanguard posted its first quarterly loss in 8 years, $3 million. The stock price dropped 12% in 1 day. The board called an emergency meeting. I wasn't invited. Kelly attended to take notes for Philip. She filled me in afterward. She said the meeting was brutal. Margaret Sullivan demanded to know why the projections were wrong. Philip blamed unprecedented market changes. James Liu pointed out that I had predicted those changes 6 months earlier. Philip dismissed my analysis as overly pessimistic. He said it didn't reflect retail fundamentals. I asked what the board decided. Kelly said they hired external consultants, a $500,000 contract. They wanted an independent assessment, what was happening, and what to do next. I laughed bitterly. They were paying consultants $500,000 to tell them what I had already said for free, 6 months earlier. The consultants spent 6 weeks analyzing everything. They accessed all company data. They interviewed executives. They conducted market and competitive research. 8 weeks later, the report came back. Kelly sent me a confidential copy. I opened it and started reading. My stomach dropped. The executive summary matched my presentation almost word for word, same conclusions, same warnings, same recommendations. Even the financial figures were nearly identical. They recommended a $22 million investment, e-commerce, store renovation, and product modernization. I had proposed the same thing for $20 million. Then I reached the line that made me furious. Vanguard's trajectory was unsustainable. Without immediate intervention, losses would exceed $15 million. Store closures and workforce reductions would follow. That was my analysis, my projection, my warning, the one Philip had dismissed. Now consultants were delivering it and being paid $500,000. The board scheduled another meeting. This time I was invited. Philip had no choice. I was the senior analyst. Margaret Sullivan personally requested my presence. I walked into the boardroom prepared. I carried my original presentation, 6 months of updated analysis, and the consultant's report, proof that I had been right. Philip was already there. He looked stressed. He had lost weight. The confidence was gone. Margaret called the meeting to order. She said the consultant's findings were concerning. Before discussing recommendations, she wanted answers. She turned to Philip. She reminded him of my presentation 6 months earlier. I had predicted exactly what happened. He had dismissed it. She asked why. Philip said hindsight was 20/20. He called my analysis one possible scenario. He said he made a judgment call, based on experience. Margaret said that judgment had already cost $8 million. The consultants were recommending my exact plan, the one I proposed for free. That wasn't hindsight. It was accuracy. James Liu spoke up. He compared my April presentation to the consultant report. They were nearly identical. Same analysis and recommendations. The only difference was cost. $22 million instead of 20, because 6 months had passed, and the problem was worse. James reminded the board what Philip had said. He called my analysis fear-driven. He said my projections were catastrophically wrong. They weren't. They were accurate. The room fell silent. Everyone looked at Philip. He tried to explain. He said he believed operational improvements were enough. He didn't think the situation was that severe. Margaret corrected him. It was worse than predicted. The company now faced $15 million in losses. I had projected 12 to 14. I was more accurate than the VP of strategy. Margaret pulled out my original presentation. She asked me to walk through predictions versus reality. I stood and connected my laptop. I opened my comparison slide. I explained my sales decline projection. Actual results matched it closely. I predicted supplier losses. We lost 2. I predicted traffic loss in younger demographics. That segment was down 19%. I projected losses would start in Q3. They started in Q2. I moved to the next slide. I reminded them of my investment recommendation, $20 million. The consultants now proposed 22. If we had acted in April, implementation would be underway. Instead, $8 million were already gone, and losses were still accelerating. Margaret turned to Philip. She asked if he had anything to add. He said he made the best decision he could. Margaret said he had the same information. He chose to ignore it. That wasn't judgment. That was leadership failure. She addressed the board. Immediate action was required. She recommended approving the consultant plan, implementing my original recommendations, and reviewing executive leadership. The board voted unanimously. The investment plan was approved. Then Margaret made another announcement. I was promoted effective immediately, Director of Strategic Planning. I would report directly to the board. My first task was leading modernization. My salary would increase 40%. She asked if I accepted. I looked at Philip. His face was red. His jaw was clenched. I said yes. Margaret nodded. She told Philip they would discuss his future. The meeting adjourned. I packed up my laptop. Kelly caught up with me in the hallway. She couldn't believe the promotion, reporting directly to the board. She was stunned. I told her it was 6 months late, but yes, she asked if I saw Philip's face. I told her I did. 6 months earlier, he called me incompetent. He said I didn't understand retail. Now I was promoted over him, and his leadership was under review. Philip's review concluded 2 weeks later. He was demoted from VP of Strategy to Senior Director of Operations. He took a 50% pay cut. He lost board access and all strategic authority. His replacement as VP of Strategy was me. At 33 years old, I became the youngest VP in Vanguard's history. The person whose analysis he had dismissed was now his boss. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. My first week as VP, I held a department meeting with the entire strategy team. Philip was there, sitting in the back row where I used to sit. I pulled up my original presentation from April, the same one Philip had dismissed. 6 months ago, I presented this analysis to the board. It was rejected. Since then, every projection has come true or been exceeded. The losses were no longer theoretical. We lost $8 million. We closed 15 stores. We laid off 200 employees. All of it was predictable and preventable. We're now implementing the exact plan I recommended in April. We're 6 months late. We're $2 million more expensive. The delay made everything worse. This should be a lesson for everyone in this room. Data doesn't care about experience or intuition. When analysis is sound, you listen. Ignoring it has consequences. Moving forward, this department will be data-driven. Decisions will be based on evidence, not assumptions. We will act quickly when problems appear. We will not wait for crises. Philip raised his hand. He said retail was complex and experience mattered. I responded without hesitation. Experience without adaptation is repetition of past mistakes. After the meeting, the CFO pulled me aside. He said the board fully supported me. Margaret had pushed hard for my promotion. They trusted my analysis completely. 3 months later, Philip resigned. Officially, he was pursuing other opportunities. In reality, his future at Vanguard was over. I selected his replacement. The modernization plan rolled out over 18 months. Sales stabilized by month 4. Growth returned by month 6. By month 18, Vanguard was profitable again. 2 years later, I was still VP of Strategy, youngest in company history, triple the salary and direct board access. The company was thriving again. I was later offered a Chief Strategy Officer role elsewhere. I declined the offer. Vanguard created that role for me instead. I accepted it last month. At 35, I became the youngest C-suite executive in company history. Not because of confidence, because of data, and the courage to stand by it. People ask if I feel vindicated, if watching Philip get demoted after he mocked me felt good. Honestly, it didn't feel good. It felt inevitable. Philip wasn't demoted because I wanted revenge. He was demoted because he made a catastrophically bad decision that cost the company millions. He ignored accurate analysis because it conflicted with his assumptions. That's not bad luck. That's bad leadership. Here's what I learned through all of this. Being right isn't enough. You have to be right in a way that's verifiable. When Philip dismissed my analysis, I didn't argue intuition. I argued data, methodology, and evidence. That's why, when the board finally reviewed my work, they couldn't dismiss it. The analysis was sound, the projections were accurate, the methodology was transparent. Philip tried to frame it as experience versus youth, retail instincts versus spreadsheets. But it was never about that. It was accurate analysis versus comfortable assumptions. I also learned that speaking up when you're right is terrifying, but necessary. I could have stayed quiet after Philip mocked me. I could have accepted that the board trusted his experience over my analysis. I could have collected my paycheck and avoided conflict. Instead, I documented everything. I updated my analysis monthly. I kept records showing my projections were coming true. So when the board finally asked questions, I had airtight evidence. That evidence is what got me promoted. Not luck, not politics, evidence. Philip taught me something valuable, even if he didn't intend to. Experience without adaptation is worthless. Confidence without accuracy is dangerous. Dismissing analysis because it's uncomfortable leads to disaster. He mocked my work in front of the board, told everyone I didn't understand retail, laughed at my projections. Now I'm chief strategy officer and he's unemployed. That's not revenge. That's cause and effect. When you mock someone's analysis, you're making a bet. You're betting your credibility against theirs. Philip made that bet. 6 months later, every projection I made had come true. The company lost $15 million following his strategy. Consultants recommended the exact plan I'd proposed. He lost that bet, catastrophically. The board didn't promote me to punish Philip. They promoted me because accurate analysis is valuable. Philip's experience was supposed to be his advantage. Instead, it became his blind spot. He was so sure he understood retail. He couldn't see when retail had fundamentally changed. I was 33 with far less experience, but I had something Philip didn't: accurate data and the willingness to follow it, even when it was uncomfortable. That's what mattered in the end. At my CSO celebration dinner, Margaret Sullivan told me something I'll never forget. What impressed her most wasn't just the analysis. It was that I stood alone when everyone else disagreed. I could have softened my projections, made them more palatable, backed down. I didn't. She told me courage matters more than consensus. Many people have good ideas. Very few fight for them when it's unpopular. That's why she believed I'd be an exceptional CSO. Philip called my analysis fear-mongering. The board called it accurate, courageous, and essential. I know which assessment I'll remember. Every time. Sometimes being right isn't about winning arguments. It's about having evidence when it matters. And sometimes, the person who mocks you today becomes a cautionary tale tomorrow. Philip is that cautionary tale now. I'm the person who was right when it wasn't popular. I'll take that outcome. Every single time.